science always been politicized? I recently had Dr. Deborah So on, and she's doing a lot of work when it comes to sex and gender identity. And she just has the mob after her constantly, also Canadian. Um, it just seems like we abandoned reason a long time ago when we say trans women are women because you wouldn't have to transition, right? If you already were the thing that you said that you are. Um, and it's at the detriment of like children and adults that maybe aren't in these categories. So it seems like the people that are like trying to protect everyone are actually doing more harm than good. And then science is kind of cowering because they don't want to have to deal with the, as you call it, like the tyranny of the minority. So can't you be like, isn't everyone aware that this is the minority, and can't they just like stand up and kind of puff up their chest metaphorically and just say enough is enough?
So that kind of goes back to your earlier question about cowardice. I always argue that, I mean, there is an established list of 7 deadly sins, and I think we should add an 8th one, which is human cowardice, because you are exactly right that the silent majority is well aware that many of these ideas are dreadful, but they're cowed into silence, right? So I receive, more emails than you have hair on your head, where someone says, "Oh, I'm a professor of internal medicine. I'm a professor of physics. I'm a professor of consumer psychology. You're my hero. Thank you so much. But please don't mention my name if you read my email." Well, therein lies the problem, right? I mean, if you can't even publicly, uh, su- you know, support the things that I'm saying, that's why these idea pathogens proliferate, because they go unchallenged. Now, oftentimes people ask me, well, but Dr. Saad, aren't you exaggerating, how many social justice warriors there are on campus? And I tell them, actually, no. And here's my rebuttal. How many people did it take to bring down the Twin Towers? It didn't take 190,000 terrorists. It didn't take 19 million terrorists. It took 19 committed terrorists who were very much driven by their zealotry to
Mhm.
alter the landscape of New York forever. Well, it doesn't take 19 million, blue-haired feminist glaciology majors to keep the rest of us quiet. It just takes a bunch of ultra fierce activists to then keep everybody else in check. And so if people were to find their spine somewhere within their gelatinous bodies, then I think we could solve this problem by next Wednesday. But if they don't, then it will be a slow ride to the abyss of infinite lunacy.
I totally agree. You used the analogy was the death by a thousand cuts for the Western civilization, and I couldn't agree more. Don't think you lose your freedoms overnight. I think it's always like very slow takes that everyone just says, "Oh, well, that's fine. It's not a big deal," and then eventually you get something that's like the Holocaust, for example, right? It didn't happen overnight. It was all these small ways to dehumanize a group of people. And you see that now, especially when it comes to men, like especially if you're a white hetero Western man, like that is like the most evil creature to ever exist. And I don't understand why we're all accepting this narrative, especially when there's so many of that, person in existence. Um, when I guess you don't really share a lot with your family, but do you have like a daughter or a son, or do you not like disclose that?
I mean, I have both. I won't share how many or
Yeah.
how they are, but yes, oftentimes my wife has asked me, you lead a very busy life. If you only stuck to your, academic pursuits, your scientific research, and so on, you'd be already very busy. Why do you have to feel like you have to weigh in on all these things and be the savior? And my answer is, well, it's two answers really. One, it's because I do it more for my children and yours.
Hmm.
I might be able to outrun the problem, but my children and yours won't. So that's number one. And number two, it goes back to what I talked about earlier, that we are shackled by our unique genetic makeup. And in my case, I'm driven by a very exacting code of personal conduct, so that at the end of the day, when I put my head on my pillow to sleep, for me to be able to not suffer from insomnia, I need to feel that I didn't exhibit any cowardice, that I did whatever I could. Uh, so in the same way that if you hear a woman being accosted violently in a dark alley, You can either be the person who pretends that you didn't hear her crying and keep walking, or you could say, well, I have to intervene here. Somebody's in trouble. Well,
Mm.
in my case, for better or worse, I'm the guy who intervenes, and therefore I weigh in. And I think that if more people were to have that sense of personal responsibility, as I said, I think the problem would be solved very quickly. The problem also comes, and I talk about this in the last chapter of the book, the problem comes from people diffusing responsibility onto others, right? So,
Mhm.
I'm too busy preparing for my daughter's, graduation, and I have to go pick up the groceries today. Let somebody else worry about these problems. Gad Saad has it. It's okay.
Mhm.
No, because every person has a stake, every person has a voice. Okay, some of us have bigger platforms than others, some of us have fancier credentials, but the reality is it's ideological trench warfare. So if you're sitting and having a chat with someone on Facebook and they say something that you disagree with, challenge them politely. If your professor says something that you think is insane, challenge them politely. Don't subcontract that important role to a few people who are putting everything on the line. And I think if we do that, we will win the battle of ideas.